Yeah, it was that they were really, a lot of them wanted us to come in. I think they were bored.
So
I'm
I-
like, kind of in a hurry.
All right.
It's like, oh, company.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is slightly after 4 o'clock, and I would like to call the Kane County Committee of the Whole meeting of August 24th, 2021 to order. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Allen. Bates.
Bates here.
Herman here.
Here.
Devist. Ford.
Present.
Present, he said. Present.
That was Ford. Thank you. Froz.
Here.
Iqbal. Gums. Here. Kenyon. Caius.
Caius present.
Kobe.
Cope's present.
Thank you. Leonard.
Leonard here.
Lewis.
Lewis here.
Martin.
Present.
Molina. Sanchez.
Sanchez here.
Shepro.
Shepro present.
Silva. Strathman.
here.
Thank you, Ms. Silva.
Strathman here.
Sturgis. Tepe.
Deppie here.
Wallace.
Here.
Wojnicki.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Do you have a quorum? Thank you very much.
Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it.
Glasses on. Who's in the back that we can call? Brian, why don't you do the Pledge of Allegiance for us? Mr. Pollock, would you honor us?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
Well done. Starting to speak in unison. Before we begin with the approval of the minutes, I just want to share with you volume 2. And here's volume 1. So this is the material we're going to be going through today. So we have snacks and there's coffee available. We'll try to be as efficient as we possibly can.
I was told there'd be no math on this exam.
And if I can remind all of our presenters today that you have approximately 5 minutes. So please be mindful of your time. And Sturgis has just arrived. So may I have a motion and a second now to approve the minutes from both the July 8th and July 27th, 2021 meetings?
Herman.
moves.
Herman second.
Mr. Herman seconds. Are there any changes on these or edits? Hearing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Allen. Bates.
Bates, aye.
Berman.
Herman, yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Devist. Ford.
Yes.
Froz.
Yes.
Iqbal. Gums.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Kobe.
Cope, yes.
Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Molina, Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Jepro,
Shepro, yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Strathman,
Strathman, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis was late, didn't hear the discussion and abstained.
Tippy,
Tepe, yes.
Wallace,
Wallace, yes.
Wojnicki.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Minutes are approved. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment online? Seeing none and no one has volunteered in the audience, begin our presentations. So here we go. All right. Clerk's office, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and members of the board. This is my 9th year presenting the clerk's budget. And my name is Tom Sherwin. I work part-time in the clerk's office as a financial analyst and an accounting backup. The first overhead you see is our administrative organizational chart. It does not contain wages, overheads, but you can check wages on the finance website. Likewise, for the other part of our organizational chart, departmental, it's the same format as our administrative. I'll go down this as fast as possible. Our revenue fund for our revenue departments. We are all dealing with COVID-19, original, and now the variant. And revenue is a slippery slope, depending a lot on this item out there. If things improve, we'll probably bypass our estimated revenue for the year of fiscal '22. We gave it a modest look because we don't know where we're going with over-the-counter revenue. If the pandemic comes back or hangs around. Head count 21, 40 people. Head count 22, 40 people. There were no changes. 3 employees left or retired and 3 new employees were hired. 2 people were lost to retirement, 1 moved on. 2 part-time employees increased their hours, 1 worked longer hours at election. And in the employees that took the place of the retirees and the move on, salaries, wages are less. So we're experiencing a pretty good thing with our wages. Union wages are down 3.71%. Overtime wages are up 73% as a result of 2 general elections in the coming fiscal year. Non-union wages and salaries are down about 1%. Election judges and workers are up very slightly. And this is a different look than we've had in the past because sometimes election judges and workers double in a 2 vote year over 1. However, last year, the election judges and workers were picked for only 1 year. And in the summer of 20,000. We thought that the 2021 April primary would cost more because of the shutdown. And COVID would still be a big problem. We actually over budgeted 21, and we probably went about 130,000 less than you'll see in this figure of 572. So total wages up 1%. Contractual expense, benefits decrease of 5%. Employees taking different forms of insurance. People who left our employ were older. That made a difference. And I think costs were pretty static. Contractual expense, variable expenses increase in 2 election year. Security, trucks to get the equipment in and out, polling place rental, general legal printing, election services, all variable expenses are more in a 2 election year. Commodities, the largest commodity expense, we continue updating our voting systems and equipment as needed. When people vote, they need the equipment to work.
Tom, excuse me, 5 minutes is up, but I'll allow you 2 more minutes.
Okay, sorry.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. Can't move it.
You need help with the next slide?
Yeah, he does.
Well, next slide is our expected COVID. It's up there now. Possible expenditures going into fiscal year 22. I hope this becomes a moot point. Those would incur more expense. Election Equipment Fund was a fund that came to us about 3 years ago as a line item when Aurora Commission voting came over to the county. We have this fund mainly for equipment, and this year we're going to be forecasting $850,000 out of it. The equipment in some cases needs replacing, and that's all I'll say about that. One mandate I would like to tell you about is a state mandate that came out in June. The new law is going to allow election authority to create and maintain a permanent vote by mail list. All qualified voters in Kane County, 315,000, will be receiving mail asking them to send something back if they want to be permanently on the vote by mail list. This is going to result in an expenditure of about $180,000. And as of yet, this is unfunded by the state. We think the state will kick in. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Building management, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 3 presentations to brief today, and out of respect to those following me, I'll move rather quickly, pending any questions. Okay, as far as our mission and goals, building management's missions and goals have not changed from previous years. This is our current staffing, still the same as last year. Please note in red over to your left, I have 6 vacancies currently at the judicial campus. So here's our current staffing and salary models. This includes a slight percentage this year to address retention, recruitment, and competitiveness throughout the sectors. So Building management is funded through 9 separate lines per buildings or centers, that kind of thing. I have them all represented here. However, we can go through individually, but basically I'm not asking for anything that wasn't asked for last year. So it's remained status quo. So again, summary, potential increased costs of utilities, both natural gas and electric are to be renegotiated this year. All indicators are that will be going up in costs. We have pretty low rates right now, but the current market is unsteady. Increasing costs of services and materials. Last Department of Labor report was 4.6 as a minimum in this zip code area. I'm looking at starting a pathway of incremental salary increases for competitive recruitment and retention based off of CPI. Provide enhanced preventive maintenance and upkeep for county properties. As many of you know, I got a lot of work ahead of me. We are currently working on the master plan and creation, and going to be looking at capital projects, investments in the future. That is obviously ongoing now. Many of you department heads have met with us already, and I thank you for that. We also increased professional services and consulting, significant reduction in reliance on outsourced services. So currently I have a staffing assessment going on and a cost benefit analysis to see where we can save money internally and provide better services throughout the counties. Also needing to be looked at and semi-addressed in the capital budget is vehicle age and obsolescence plan. Pending any questions, I'll move on to the Mill Creek SSA.
Forward.
There we go. Okay, the Mill Creek SSA, as we know, the SSA has its own separate budget, separate from county funds. They are supported through a levy through the residents out there. The mission and goals and services have not changed since previous years. The current staffing model is, as you see up here. This is the current budget compared to years past budget. Right now, we're going to look at operating in about a $6,200 deficit, but that can be covered through reserves and also the end of a contract coming up this fiscal year. So current future of the SSA, the levy has stayed flat since the creation of the SSA around 27 years ago. Obviously, that affects what the SSA can provide for its residences. Goods and services can steadily rise, and struggling to keep up. You start thinking about direct buried electrical lines out there, 27 years old. We're starting to run into problems like that. Just like your house, it starts to need work after a while. We could look at increasing the levy by 1.4% per finance, which would bring in about $9,500 extra a year. Reduction of services is potentially imminent without the levy. We have an ongoing discussion of land transfers going on with the developer, Shodine, and other agencies. We need to take a real hard look at that because it could potentially bring on additional financial costs or burdens to the SSA. And then I talk a little bit about the acreage of the parcels out there. Pending any questions, I'll move on to the capital projects budget.
Go forward.
Yes, ma'am. So the 2022 budget for 805 capital project.
Oh, yes.
Building for the SSA, are we building adequate reserves?
Very good question. So over the years, the reserves have been somewhat depleted in the plan. I'm trying to avoid using the reserves as the fallback. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned 27-year-old utilities and all that kind of stuff. It would just seem like we ought to anticipate spending money on their behalf.
I'd have to go back and look, but I think we're sitting at around 189,000 in reserves. I think a safe place that was assumed in years previous was over 300,000.
Okay, well, just a thought.
Yep, yes.
Maybe I'll address that a little bit because I've met with Chris and staff over this, and we're gonna, the SSA at Mill Creek has what's called the Mill Creek SSA Advisory Board, which is an advisory organization of local citizens that advises us on what they feel about local issues out there. So we're gonna have a sit down with them and kind of a budget meeting of all those people and talk about priorities and what services they really want, what services we may have to do without, and you know, how are we going to rebuild those reserves? But we're comfortable right now, but we can't continually take a few thousand out every year to balance the budget. You know, pretty soon we'll be below that. So we're working on it.
Okay.
Yes.
Question, and I guess I would direct this toward Drew. I oftentimes view this project as a condominium association type situation. And my point being, if we ever dip below reserves, who's the backstop for that? The county, or do they charge a special assessment to the residents there to make that happen?
It's never had to be done before. So whether the county bonded some money to get through a specific needs. The one scenario we've talked about is what if a tornado goes through and suddenly we have $50,000 or $100,000 in tree removal, we would have to look to the county to back us up and then do a special assessment. But you know, for those of you that don't know, Mill Creek was a unique community within the county. It's unincorporated, but it's got about 45 residents, so it's as big as Auburn. And they don't have a city council or a fire department or anything else. Sheriff provides services. They have their own water rec district. You know, there's a whole group of agencies that run that, but the county has the ultimate say in the operation of the SSA. So, but we meet every 60 days out there, and they have a little board, sort of like a city council, and they're just a advisory status to the county board, because we wanted to have some local input rather than some guy from Algonquin having a say in what's going on.
Well, since I'm from Gilbert, that must be Chris.
Oh, I said Gilbert, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Shepro, Cliff, since it's a special service area, it already has a maximum tax levy that they can extend. If they are extending at that maximum rate, they would have to go through effectively a reprocessing to raise more money. They'd have to publish, get people to participate, hold a public hearing as we do when we establish one in the first instance, unless a generous somebody came along to fund it. But
So what I'm hearing though is we are the backstop. The county is the backstop for this. And even if that's a lend and we go back out.
But it's not a required backstop.
Got it.
All right. are we
Don't
good?
we determine what their SSA contribution should be?
No, it's a tax levy. So
When you set it in the proposing ordinance says what the tax rate will be.
Yeah.
And you can't exceed that without doing essentially the process over again.
You can go up CPI, correct?
I don't
we never
think
have.
so, no.
You never have, or you cannot?
You cannot. I would
Not like
pretty
a
sure you-
regular SSA then.
Why not?
We can raise the tax levy, but even with that, it's if we were to do the maximum, it amounts to about $9,000 a year. So that's what we have to talk to the advisory board about.
But if you want to raise the tax, usually what you do is you propose potentially a maximum rate that you won't do every year, because then unlike our levy, where if you don't levy the full amount in a year, that's now your new extension base. If you have a maximum levy of 100,000 and you only need 20, you levy 20 until you need 100. But if you need 101, you have to start over again.
Mr. Tepe?
Tepe here. Chris, to your knowledge, has a reserve study ever been done there?
The last document I've seen is 2011, I believe.
Or a reserve study?
Well, it was an assessment study on future costs and the whole gamut.
Okay.
For us speaking, we do have a recommendation from Mr. Anzik on what he thought was a comfortable reserve, and we're below that right now. But so, like I said, we're not in dire straits. But it's like if you bought a brand new house and put aside a budget for repairs. You know, when it was brand new in the first 20 years, you didn't use it that much. But now we're in that 27-year age, and things are starting to need extra service, and we're taxing and providing the SSA fees at the same rate as we did in the early 90s. So again, we just started going down this road, literally met yesterday. So we'll have more to report in the future.
Okay, very good.
Last comment.
Less comment, and then let's go forward.
My belief is that some portion of the Mill Creek development gets Riverboat money to cover some of the costs.
I don't see that budget line.
That is not,
I don't think so.
that is not confirmed at all.
Could have been one time, maybe.
Yeah, I understood
early.
that there were some salaries,
I don't recall seeing any of our
you know,
paperwork that reflected that.
that
No,
just
nor have
may
I.
be obsolete information.
All right, very good. Thank you all. Yes.
Okay, in reference to the building management department's capital budgets, capital projects budget, the mission and goals have not changed. As you look at it on the surface, it'll appear to look a little higher than last year, and I can explain that. So starting in the September admin committee, I'll start to do some housekeeping, so to speak. This year, I held off on 4 budgeted capital projects due to the master plan, as well as I have cash on hand that I would like to pull forward in support of once that master plan comes in, if we have any immediate needs to address. So that'll be a total of $2,425,000 that I'll be moving into 2022 from 21. So resolution that was passed last winter, we increased the amount of A&E from 300,000 to 800,000. So that's a $500,000 difference. Also this year, I was budgeted to purchase a vehicle, which we did not use. So I'll carry that forward, essentially making the number look double next year as I continue to look towards age and obsolescence of our vehicles and equipment. Right here, this slide here, you'll pretty much see what I'm projecting for next year. One major difference in here, you'll see the county-wide remediation plan. So when the demolitions for the Fabian complex and the Corners complex were put together in 2021, there's I see the need to have more remediation funds available. Quite frankly, Fabian, whether we redevelop it or put it on the market, it's going to need a lot of love, soils, underground tanks, things of that nature. Again, did a limited capital projects budget for 2022, pending on the results of the master plan. I did keep the standard county-wide upkeep maintenance line items. And you see the rundown there for 805. Again, I just reviewed all those. Pending any questions, I'll turn the rest of the capital projects budget over to ITD and Mr. Roger Fonstock.
No questions for Chris. Okay.
Chris just
All right.
ran away.
Good afternoon. I'm Roger
Was that-
Fonstein.
Sir,
Yes,
was
sir.
that Chris's first time giving a budget proposal?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So good evening. My name is Roger Fonstock. I'm with the county IT department, and we're going to talk about the capital projects for the Kane County IT department. So let's get through here. The fund that we're talking about is 500, 800, 801. And the fund Chris was talking about is 805. So we separate the capital into the building management and the county IT. So we focus on 2 things in this capital, and it's the replacement of computer equipment that's aging on depreciation schedules. So a depreciation schedule is how long does your computer last? How long does a laptop last? How long does a network switch last? Storage device, those types of things. So what we try to do is put everything on a schedule, and then we replace a percentage of it every year. Right now, probably one of the largest things that we replace is computer equipment, and we replace that on a 5-year schedule. So we replace about 20% of the county's computing power every year and keep it on a 5-year schedule. Network equipment, switches and routers, those are usually about 7-year schedule. So we're trying to keep up with that. And we also deal with storage and servers. So you'll see some numbers about that. But a lot of this is based on replacing equipment that we already have in use that's getting older, essentially. And then there's computer software capital, which is mostly centered around finance and improving and enhancing the NovaTime time and attendance system. So we buy time clocks for people to punch in and punch out. And we're also buying software development for finance when we change fiscal year or when we have to have an additional reporting requirement. So these are the computer items that we buy. And you'll see the list from top to bottom. I don't necessarily want to read it to you, but some of the big items, the PCs and the laptops, we are looking at how the last year affected us. We added quite a bit to the computing power of the county during CARES Act for remote work. This does not necessarily reflect replacing that because we just bought it. But what we're looking at is that number for PCs, laptops, not necessarily monitors, but in the near future, that might have to increase if we want to maintain the flexibility of remote work. We did add a lot of devices. When I say a lot, we went from somewhere around 1,500 devices to around 2,000 devices this last year. And that's tablets, laptops, computers. Some of that, could be attributed to things like the vaccination sites, and we paid for those with CARES Act money. Some of the mobile and remote work was paid through that as well. So a lot of that will be decisions that'll be made down the road. The other big items in there is storage. We're looking at buying more storage for our server end. A lot of that is related to the increased digitization of offices. We're buying more storage to store more data. We do have some battery or uninterruptible power systems, UPS systems, to replace in there. Pretty much typical printers and copiers that we replace throughout the county. And then the other big number in there is the switches and routers. We have 150 different network switches in different closets throughout the county, and we replace those on about a 7-year schedule. So that 150 network switches and routers, they're usually somewhere in the $5,000 to $7,000 range each. So if you multiply out 150, it's quite a sizable replacement program. And we're trying to go through and upgrade those to get next generation switches. So we think that we'll be able to get through those on schedule, but at 200,000 basically a year. So that's the capital items for computers. It's 1.1 million. The software side's a little lighter. This is mostly ERP, time and attendance, document management around the finance system. It's 106. So this is the net change. We went from an amended budget of 1.8 million to a total budget in 2022 of 1.25. We're down $635,000. A lot of that is a carryover from CARES Act in previous years when we couldn't spend the money. So it went into 2021 as an amended budget. I would say that 2021 over 2022 is comparable outside of that amended budget. We're right on target. We look at the 7-year cycle. It's about $1 million a year if you look at the replacement cycle, or about $7 million of computer capital throughout the entire county offices and departments. So to get through it on a 7-year schedule, you need about $1 million a year. But that's the balance sheet that finance provides for the total capital budget. You'll see the revenue that shows up at $7,572,000 and expenses matching the revenue. That's total for both building management and IT capital. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Mr. Tepe.
Yes, sir.
Tepe here. I noticed in the budget, you had money there for SSD. You think you have ample money there to really handle the requirements for the new cameras that are now going to be required for all police officers?
So the sheriff's office, which we're directly
That
responsible,
comes out of their budget?
that they have a budget for, with GTAC and a company to store their cameras. That was a 5-year contract. So they have the cameras, the service of the cameras and the storage. Outside agencies and, the stuff that we collect and discovery from agencies, we're working on that with state's attorney, public defender in the courts. We have adequate storage right now. I think that you're going to see that increase as the demand increases. But we're in good shape right now.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Fonstock.
Thank you.
Court services.
Hi there. My name is Lisa Ost. I'm with Court Services. As usual, I bite off more than I can chew. So I'm going to skip a lot of the slides that I gave you. I did email everybody an annual report a few weeks back. A lot of that data is covered in there. Okay, so Court Services is a large organization. We cover probation, pretrial, juvenile detention, and the diagnostic center. Far too much for me to go over in detail mission statements and org charts for all of that. All of that material was submitted to finance, so all of that can be found on their website. And I'm sure that they'll make packets. As with last year, the majority of our budget supports personnel. Very small slices of our budget supports contractual or commodities. And the great majority of those expenses, contractual and commodities, goes to the juvenile detention facility. We have standards that we have to follow, especially as far as things like food. We have a certain number of calories we have to feed the kids every day. They need clothing, they need all those items. That is what those line items support. And like I said, the rest really supports just staff because we run probation and pretrial in the diagnostic center. One of the really unique things, though, about court services that I want to make sure you know is that we're kind of unique in the court system in that when you look at our expenses and our revenue, the majority of the budget for my department comes from funds not the county, meaning 44% of our budget comes from the county, 35% comes from the AOIC salary reimbursements. So I talk about that kind of being a cost share program. So Kane County pays the expense of the probation officers up front. We voucher downstate to Springfield every month, and then Springfield reimburses the county. So the county ends up eating the cost of about 44% of the department, and the other 56% we make up from reimbursements from the state, as well as our own special funds and different fees and fines that are levied. Another way to look at that is it's almost like a 56% return on investments for the expenditures that you make. You get 56% reimbursed ultimately. And then that money that we spend goes towards the citizens of Kane County. I have no idea why that slide looks so weird. So I'm going to skip that. I'm going to skip these slides. This just goes through the work product that we do so that you can see, we do a significant amount of work. Court services, we do everything from the arrest event, bond call, juvenile detention. The diagnostic center does all of the fitness to stand trial evaluations, insanity pleas, MIRA evaluations, and then of course probation supervises the people once they've been sentenced and they're placed on a term of probation. And so as you look through these slides, you can see we're doing a significant amount of work. You can see where our work is coming from throughout the county and the kinds of offenses and the kinds of people that we're working with. I've previously at our local subcommittee, brought in our directors to talk about our specialty courts and the different programs that we do. And again, I don't know why these slides aren't translating well, so we'll work on that. I do want to focus a bit here. So bottom line budget issues. We just got done negotiating a union contract. And so you can see for the union wages, it has a proposed 3.91% increase. I want you to know that that reflects a 3% going retroactive because their salaries were flat. We were in negotiation, so they didn't have a contract. So 3% of that 3.9 was going backwards, their retroactive salary, as well as them projecting into next year an additional 3%. So we negotiated a 2-year contract with 3% increases. The reason that that's only 3.91%, unfortunately, is our turnover and our current open positions. So right now I have 14 or 15 open positions, and I'm going to talk about that more in a couple of slides down. But when someone leaves, and they often do, we're a great training ground for other counties and other departments. A lot of my probation officers will start their career here and then they move on to the police departments. They leave and then their replacement started a lower salary. So that's the majority of why that salary line item doesn't look like 6%. For the non-union staff wages, again, that would be 7% to cover the 2 years. We did give increases to certain special staff, which I could go into more specifically for the diagnostic center. One of the things that we have found is that our doctoral level forensic psychologists could make far more working in the private sector and doing telehealth. And yet they have such a crucial and pivotal role to play in the court system. For example, if someone, if the state's attorney, whoever wants to find out about, are they fit to stand trial? We need a doctorate level forensic psychologist to do that. I currently have 2 openings and I can't fill them because people don't want to do this work working with people individually in the middle of a pandemic. It's been very hard to fill those positions. And so we did give some increases in that department in particular for retention. People were coming to us saying they were being recruited. Can we match? What can we do to work with them? So I do acknowledge that that's there. The other thing that I wanted to cover, again, our staff turnover, the wages and the budget. This has been a really hard thing for court services in general. I know all the departments have this issue. The Tribune writes stories about it. Chick-fil-A is closing restaurants because they can't get workers. We're all experiencing the same thing. And so our turnover has increased. It's hard to be mad or upset with our employees when they leave because somebody else is paying them $10,000, $15,000 more a year for virtually the same amount of work or the same kind of work. And especially when we look at something like juvenile detention, our detention officers are in person. They came to work every single day during the pandemic. You can't be a detention officer from home. And yet you can see as far as comparable wages, they make the same, if less, than other kinds of work that don't require a college education and is much easier. You don't have to work with offenders. You're not wrestling with people. And that honestly is where our most amount of turnover has been. I'm giving you foreshadowing. I've never come to the board before to ask that you think about scheduling raises down the line. But I do want to highlight that this has really become crucial during the pandemic. Our staff turnover is an issue. We've got 10 open positions in juvenile detention, and they're all the detention officers. We're mandated by the state of Illinois and federal law that we have to maintain an 8-to-1 ratio of staff to residents during all waking hours. And that's becoming increasingly difficult with the amount of turnover that we have and the amount of open vacancies that we have. And a lot of that, the guys are just leaving. They're going to the jail to work. They don't require a college diploma, and yet they make 10, 15,000 more a year. They're becoming police officers who pay 20, 30,000 more a year. We need to be competitive somehow. And so I'm putting it on your radar that we've got this contract for the next 18 months, but then we have to open it and we have to start renegotiating. And that this is definitely a problem area that we've identified. And I believe that, I mean, all of the rest of my slides, as far as the special funds are up here, probation fees.
Excuse me, you are over, so
I'm so sorry.
there's lots to talk about.
There is, I apologize. Oh, one thing I did want to give you a heads up, though, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, is that the AOIC came out yesterday and announced that the state of Illinois was going to be taking over the pretrial program on behalf of the state. So what that means for Kane County is we have 13 employees that work in that program. As of next year, the state of Illinois will no longer be funding those employees. And so when I'm here 12 months from now, next summer, we'll begin those discussions about what does that mean for the budget? Because the state of Illinois will be taking over those programs, we'll be negotiating with the union for what does that look like as far as staff decreases, budget, reimbursements, and all of that. I don't know a lot yet because they've just announced it on Friday. Chief Justice Ann Burke made that announcement. And so as I learn more, I will let you know.
Can you share that with us one more time?
Sure.
Did you just say that we're going to be losing resources to pay 13 employees?
Yes. So the state of Illinois, so for the pretrial budget, the salaries, it's 13 staff. The total salaries for the program is $680,000. The state of Illinois gives the county $655,000 on behalf of those employees. Next year, the state fiscal year starts in July. So they've given us notice that at some point between July and January of 2023, that they will no longer be funding those positions and that the state of Illinois will be taking over that program. And this is part of their larger, more comprehensive criminal reform that they're doing. They've done many reports and as well as passed the Safety Act. I know a lot of departments are going to be talking about pretrial reform. And this is all part of that reform effort. The state of Illinois wants to mandate that every pretrial department across the state is consistent and uses the same practices. And the only way they know to do that is to take it over at the state level. They've issued reports on that. I'm happy to email that out to everybody if you want to see that, but that is their plan. So yes, we'll probably be downsizing. I just don't know exactly by how many employees yet, but that will be happening.
Okay, very good. And yes, if you could mail that report out, you can send it to Jane.
Yes.
And then she'll send it out to everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Well, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, thank you. The sheriff is here.
Happy hot afternoon, everybody. I wanted to be punctual to the podium to credit back some of Lisa's time. So as we look at, I knew this PowerPoint pointer was going to do this to me. As we build a budget, and by the way, this is my third annual PowerPoint presentation for a fiscal year. So I'm very proud to say that. It's always important to look in the rearview mirror and see where we came from and align that with our mission and goals with a general operational plan to get us where we needed to be. So when I looked in the rearview mirror when I was building this and submitting our budget, I remembered when I took office in December of 2018, and just a couple of highlights, or I'm hesitant to call them highlights. I had to pass a budget adjustment for being $380,000 over budget from the previous year. The loss of electronic monitoring in the county dramatically affected our prison population because all those folks had to come back into custody. We had 5 union contracts at the sheriff's office up for negotiation at that point in time. We had an outdated and unfunded patrol fleet that created danger to not only our deputies, but to the public. We had 8 to 10 deputies out on injured reserve at that time that weren't even able to work. Incredibly low morale and low hiring and recruitment rate in our corrections division. We had 3 incidents in my first month and a half as sheriff of contraband heroin inside of our jail's general population. We had 340 plus people in custody in our jail experience severe opioid withdrawals. And we had the general opioid epidemic. So obviously, not only did we have a plan to drive our new administration forward, we had a lot of things to fix. With that, shortly after taking office, within 2.5 months, we had the Pratt shooting, which was a big weight on my office in one day and for about a month to follow. We also shortly thereafter led the charge alongside the health department in the Kane County pandemic. Not to mention at the same time, we faced multiple incidents of civil unrest, severe damage in the city of Aurora, threats to our officers, damage to our vehicles, and a general discontent for law enforcement wherein we had to keep our morale up. not to mention the Justice Reform Bill, which I am very proud to say the Sheriff's Office continues to stay ahead of in every advancement requested within that bill. So we're very proud to show that we are on track again in our third year in this administration to close at least 6 figures under budget. This year, which has been an anomaly, we've actually shared some of our budget with the state's attorney's office. You don't commonly see that in government. They needed to get to a direction in public safety that served everybody globally. So we were happy to provide about $280,000 of our court security budget to help them get where they needed to be. We continue to be very transparent for the first time in our internal accounts. That includes asset forfeiture and other fines and fees that we collect, that we share monthly with not only our county board committee, but county finance. And again, we were able to accomplish so much to include body cameras, an updated patrol fleet and dash cameras, just to name a very small few of where we've gotten to, while staying well under budget. And please remember that we've brought back electronic monitoring out of the Sheriff's Office. This program over the last year and a half that has been in full function, if you crunch the numbers, we've saved county taxpayers about $900,000 if you trade off what court security or court services used to have to fund to run this program with the revenue. That, by the way, our group that runs electronic monitoring has been outstanding and staying on track in bringing in that revenue from people who are on electronic monitoring. And I'm very proud to say that our 550 jail population has dropped to an average of 380 per day now. That is a dramatic cost savings to our residents. So remember, you were paying $72 a day or $75 a day, depending on their needs, for detainees in our jail. 60 to 70 of them right now are on electronic monitoring that could be in our jail. You're paying $3.49 a day. So morale is up. We only have 1 deputy on leave. We are one of the only counties in the nation to report a downturn in opioid overdose deaths in the year 2020. I'm going to quickly fast forward through our charts here, because you can find those by going to canesheriff.com and referencing our annual report that's posted on there. We maintained our commitment after our retirement incentive package that we did in 2020 to keep our staff flat at the administrative level. We're still working with an interim commander in corrections and only 2 lieutenants at that level, where normally it is a full-time commander and 4 lieutenants. Again, all in the vein of cost savings. We are absorbing 8 maintenance staff from building management. So you're going to see an increase in our budget, in the corrections budget, due to that. We also have 1 human resource operator that is important to have when you have 300 employees, and 1 mental health staff reentry expert. Can I have just 2 more minutes, Madam Chair? Thank you so much. And then what you're seeing in any other increase is just general contractual increases from our healthcare provider, which is Wexford, and of course, food costs. That's where we come in every year so well under budget, especially when we keep our jail population down. We have to plan for the worst when it comes to our jail population and feeding them and caring for them medically, but we get a reduction on that because we pay monthly and they only charge us for what we actually use. So that's a benefit. Of course, I encourage you to take a look at our public safety chart, which includes the Office of Emergency Management. We are asking for 3 additional deputies. The proposal here is 2 deputies will be added to our electronic monitoring group when cashless bail comes around and our jail population drops. We anticipate that many more people will be on electronic monitoring. It takes about a year to get a deputy up to full speed where they're in service on their own. So we anticipate in FY23 that we'll actually be able to reduce our correction officer staff while we add these 3 deputies, and that 2 deputies for electronic monitoring, and that 1 deputy is dedicated for this campus here. This is a proposal that was discussed by County Board Member Davis, or suggested by County Board Member Davis and Judicial and Public Safety Committee, that we add that actual salary into the budget to have somebody stationed here instead of paying that overtime that we've been doing for the last year and this year. Office of Emergency Management, through the pandemic, I made the decision to add 2 full-time positions because they were the driving force with the health department in getting to where we are, both in PPE distribution and operations at all of the clinics. And these were essential to make that job happen. I'm sorry that I have to be so expeditious. And court security, slight increase. We reduced the number of court security officers in our submitted budget. However, these are incremental increases in their collective bargaining agreement. And we also have a finance coordinator that is paid out of that, and a social worker that is paid out of that budget as well. And also, I want to point out that that is the budget that we shared with, again, the state's attorney's office. So I know the state's attorney, the chief judge, and I have conversed quite a bit on how we get from point A to point B and where we want to be in funding all of our needs. I feel like the sheriff's office is in a great position financially, and we've always been, I feel, incredible financial stewards with everything that the board has allowed us to do. So we are simply in support, if you all so choose, to continue the rollover of our annual savings to fund our next year's budget. Of course, the American Rescue Plan is right around the corner, and we're going to get to hear tomorrow about how we can apply for those funds. We do support, as justice managers, and I know State's Attorney Mosser will agree with us, an increase in sales tax of a very nominal percentage, about 0.25%, and public safety sales tax appropriation that is really referencing what the law was designed to do, where it primarily funds public safety work and also supports transportation as a secondary. So thank you all so much for your time. Sorry to go a little bit over 5. Have a good afternoon. Any questions for me?
Yes, I believe so.
Just a statement, sir, just here. You know, time and time again, you hear the cliches of we want to see some cultural change within an organization or a department. Ron, you have embodied and exemplified everything that we could ask from finance to morals to, I mean, right down the line. You have just done a great job, and we're lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cliff.
Anything else? Oh, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Copy, please.
Oh, Mr. Kobe, yes.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hain, thank you for your presentation. You didn't miss a beat. It was quite impeccable. Very impressed. Recently, Jamie Moser had petitioned the board in regards to attempting to attract some revenues for child advocacy. And she had mentioned that through your benevolence that you were able to help her on a couple occasions. And I was wondering if that is still a possibility.
Absolutely. State's Attorney Mosser and I continue to converse about her needs and the open gaps in our budget that we can support her through. So this will, I think, Mr. Kobe, this will be a conversation we continue through the end of this fiscal year, and certainly take a good hard look at our court security fund and see how we can better allocate it to other divisions of the county, because we've shown that we don't need everything that's being allocated to us right now through court security. Can you believe I just said that as an agency head?
I'm sorry that we had to make it your responsibility, but thank you very much.
Of course.
Any other questions? Thank you again.
Thank you.
Courts.
Good afternoon. Whoops. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the County Board. I'm Andrea O'Brien. I'm the Deputy Court Administrator. I want to offer Judge Hall apologies. He was not able to be here this afternoon, so I'll be doing the presentation. I will keep it brief. I just quickly want to go through. So here is our organizational chart. It's for your review. We have added 2 new additional employees mid-year this year that we will continue on next year. It was an approval of our interpreter coordinator and our interpreter coordinator assistant position. And then I just want to hit the special funds. We have 4 special funds. I will just briefly mention 2 of them, the foreclosure mediation and the DUI fund. There is no change from 2021 to 2022. The foreclosure mediation fund and our children's waiting room. Due to COVID, there's been decreases in revenue this year. We anticipate some decreased revenue as well next year. So that addresses our special revenue fund. But I want to spend most of the time on our general fund. As you can see in our general fund, our total expense budget is an increase of 3.91%. Most of that is due to increased salaries, and then the increased cost of health and dental benefits for our employees. But what I'd really like to draw your attention to is our increase in revenue. We have almost a 47% increase in revenue. This year it has increased, and we anticipate the same thing for next year and even more. So there's 2 main reasons our revenue has increased. The first one is AOIC reimbursements. So we have changed the way we do and work with interpreters for different matters in the court. Since we've changed the system, we are now using registered and certified interpreters. Those are refunded in whole and in part from the AOIC. Reimbursements back in 2019 were not consistent, but as the year has gone on, 2021, the AOC is reimbursing us more consistently. So you can see in 19, the reimbursement was just over 43. Our cost was 410. In 20, our reimbursement was 97. Our cost was 353. And this year, since we've changed the way we use interpreters, you can see our reimbursement is 248 and our cost is 207. Now, some of the reimbursement is carryover from last year. The expenses incurred in 2020, but we received the reimbursement in 2021. That reflects the difference in the two numbers. So we anticipate the AOIC to continue to reimburse us for interpreter costs. So our line item has decreased in our general budget for that. And then something new that we have is our judicial technology fee. That's a fee collected in some of our cases. The fee varies. But as you can see, this year, we've already collected $137,000. We anticipate that to continue for this year and continue in 2022. So our revenue increases, as you can see, outweighs our expenses that we're asking for. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Surges.
In terms of the surges here, in terms of the reimbursements on the left, was
Yes.
this one of those situations where we put on an employee to help us bring in those additional funds and go with the certifieds?
That's correct.
I just want to make sure that as a board, we collectively, it's
Understand.
not always cut. Sometimes you got to spend a buck to.
That's exactly what happened. So we incurred and we spent more money, and you can see we're actually reaping the benefits of the savings. Before, we did not have an interpreter coordinator position. We actually contracted out our interpreter services with a third party. We have now brought interpreter coordinator into our salaried general fund position, and they now coordinate and only use certified and registered interpreters.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Any online?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Circuit Clerk.
I don't like holding all these things because I talk with my hands, which you all pretty much know. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Teresa Barrero, the Circuit Clerk for the 16th Judicial Courts. Okay, now I need to know how to figure this out. Okay. These are the primary duties of our office. And in addition to our central location at 540 South Randall Road, we are in these 6 locations. We also have deputy clerks that staff court cases currently via Zoom at the Elgin Mental Health Center, Amita Mercy Medical Center in Aurora, and St. Joseph Pravina Medical Center in Elgin. Slides 5 and 6 are organizational chart. We currently have 64 union, and actually it should say 26 non-union staff with a total of 106 authorized staff. This is a slide of the breakdown of submitted budget for 2022 and the support staff currently in each of these special funds and their salaries and benefits. The special funds that we collect help fund these salaries. This is a slide of our accomplishments and highlights and goals for the past 9-10 months that I've been in office. We've been very aggressive in doing several changes and helping to get morale up. One, I'll just go through the list. We've implemented Civil Proposed Orders e-file. We've implemented Navigator 2018, which is an updated version of the case management system. We've implemented ECHO version 2, which stands for Electronic Court Operations. The staff at the Circuit Clerk's Office initially created the previous Electronic Court Operation System, which needed to be recreated due to reasons that Flash Adobe was being eliminated. ITD recreated this with the assistance from our office, and the circuit clerk staff trained the judicial partners. We increased the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We placed a payment drop box in front of the building. We did some office restructuring. We started some facility improvements, which include new awning, new carpet, public counters, and we also had air purifiers installed. We are currently working on development requests for compliance with record-keeping manuals that are due. This all needs to be completed by January 1st of 2022. We have participated in employment job fairs virtually and in person. We distributed work from home equipment, which kept our staff down to 50% during the initial COVID, and we could work from home. The administrative staff never worked from home. They were always on site. I'd like to point that out. We are currently adding support for warranty amnesty programs. We are working along with the state's attorney's office and the sheriff's office in planning expungement outreach events. Okay, the reasons for asking for 8 new positions is 6 of these. The Illinois Supreme Court has rewritten the manual on record keeping, which is the guiding authority of the circuit clerk's record keeping. This will bring new programming for the case management system. This goes into effect 1/1/22. It will also affect other applications that interact with the court's case management system that will need to have changes made. The Illinois Supreme Court is requiring better data collection and reporting for statistics across the state of Illinois, and for the circuit clerks to be able to report in uniformity. This will take more work in analyzing, compiling, and reporting the required information to the state of Illinois. We are also asking for 2 additional deputy clerks. Those will be for the 2 new courtrooms that are already being installed. One is evictions and the other is in the abuse and neglect courtroom. As you can see from the 2022 proposed budget and general fund, which help fund our operations, there is a difference. These are the differences between 2021 and 2022. Now, the next 6 slides, which I'm going through kind of fast, show the differences between all of these, which I do have copies that we have made and we can pass out to all of you so that you can analyze them a little further. This last slide, here you see the differences in expenses and revenues starting with 2018. As you can see, we are not back to normal. Some of this is due to fines and fees being waived due to COVID, but the courts are moving forward. We are asking for the bare minimum to operate the state of Illinois requirements for Kane County in the circuit court. Without these new positions, we will not be able to meet our statutory responsibilities and be in compliance with AOIC. Our increase is 14%. That completes my budget presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'll try and help.
Yes, Mr. Shepro.
Madam Clerk, is the 2 new people, are they 2 new authorized, or are they people where there are currently vacancies?
No, these would be 2 new. We do not have enough staff, even if we filled all of our vacancies, because of course, you know, we're down. We do show vacancies in our budget, but that's due to turnover. But even if we had all those positions filled, we still would not have enough clerks for those 2 additional courtrooms.
Teresa, just a quick question, only because you were the first person to bring it up in your slide.
Name, please, Mr.
Sturgis. We have, as a collective, viewed attrition at the county as a mandated hiring freeze under the "we won't replace as they retire" sort of thing.
Right.
But I haven't personally seen much data saying that we've aged out or people have taken those retirements that we haven't replaced. I know you've only been on watch for a short period of time, but in your slide, you mentioned it. Have you seen that at all for you're a larger department?
Right.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, we had 7 people retire.
You did, okay.
Yes. And we filled those positions, but then we had 7 people leave to other offices throughout the county. 7 of there's more than that actually, but 7 of those persons went either to the state's attorney's office or the chairperson's office, the county board, and also to, I believe, where else? And the treasurer. And they all went getting 10, 15,000 more a year than we pay at the circuit clerk's office. And the responsibilities, not to say that they're not going to have large responsibilities where they're going, but I mean, currently they sit in a courtroom with the judge, you know, the prosecutors, the state's attorney. It's a big job, and it takes a lot to, you know, courage to apply for a job like this and only get paid $15 an hour. So of course, we're looking at ways, because we do have a union contract negotiations coming up. And we are looking, of course, you know, I'm from the old school here, that we didn't give anything more than 2%. And unfortunately, that makes a domino effect for all of us. We're up to the $15, but in another 2 years, we'll be way behind again. So even
But
$15 is behind.
Specifically, the hiring freeze allowing people to retire and not replacing them. And do you think that strategy has been successful or ill?
I don't think it really,
No effect.
no, I don't think
Got it.
so.
Okay.
Because as long as I was on the board, people were always getting hired to fill those positions where someone left.
You just have a unique perspective.
But now,
You're-
now I'm seeing on the other side, and you truly get appreciation for the staff and what they actually do for what they get paid for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Shepro, I was under the impression that the hiring freeze did not apply to the independent elected offices. Unless there was specific.
Microphone, please.
I can answer that.
Sorry.
I believe that it only usually comes up or came up.
Excuse me, did everybody hear the question? Why don't you repeat it one more time, please?
Yeah, the question was that I thought was under the Shepro again, with a microphone this time. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Was that the hiring freeze did not apply to the independent elected officers, with the possible exception of 1 or 2 instances where the board specifically is allowed to set the number, but that generally isn't the case. So.
Well, I can kind of answer that. Normally in the past, it's never been a problem if an elected official hires. I've had some hires, but it's as long as you stay within your budget parameter.
Right.
It's not usually a discussion, but if you go way over your budget, then it's obviously a discussion. And as an elected official from being on the board previously, I've taken that into consideration when I've done my hires that I have had.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Public Defender.
Good evening. I'm Rochelle Conant. I'm the King County Public Defender. I am going to start with my presentation. I know that I had emailed out a larger presentation to all of you that gets into a little bit more specifics. I would encourage you, if you did not receive that, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to pass it along again. Sorry, there we go. Okay, this is our organizational chart. The only change from last year to this year was that in March, you all did graciously grant us another attorney for abuse and neglect. So that is reflected on here, but that is the only change in our organizational chart. This is just kind of a preview of what we have been doing in our office. From this slide, we are on track to either meet or exceed our 2019 levels of cases opened and closed And this gives you an idea specifically in the categories where we are with cases. Again, we are probably be meeting and exceeding from last year and from 2019. Oops. This is our proposed budget. There are minor increases to our books and subscriptions, which is our Westlaw contract, as well as attorney registration and dues. Our major, the biggest increases in salaries and wages, which I will get to. When I sat down to do our budget this year, I was already aware in March, did a presentation for judicial and public safety, that our salaries in King County fell below our neighboring counties with comparable population. But what I didn't know in doing this deep dive is the fact that our public defender salaries were significantly less than the salaries of other departments in this county. And this slide shows you that the Kane judicial staff attorneys, their starting salary is $56,500, and the state's attorney, Ms. Mosser, is trying to get her starting salary to $59,000 and has already started making headway to that. So you can see our starting salary is $54,000. So there is a significant difference there in starting salaries just within King County. This slide is a comparison, as I said, between Lake and Will. They have comparable population to our county and kind of gives you an idea of average salaries with bar admission dates. So this is years of experience and gives you an idea of where we are in comparison to those two counties. And there are, as you can see, significant differences between our public defender salaries and those in Lake and Will. This gives you an idea of the King County salaries. Again, it shows bar admissions, so years of experience. This is average. In the PowerPoint that I sent out through email, there's more specifics in there, but this is the average differences. So if you just look, for example, if you were admitted to the bar between 2017 and 2020, it's about a $5,000 difference between public defender salaries and state's attorney salaries. Oops, back. So as I said, in doing this presentation and creating the budget, was very surprised in the differences of the salaries between our office and the state's attorney's office and the judicial attorneys. What I have started to see, and what Ms. Oss pointed out as well, is we are getting fewer resumes in our office. We have been able to hire attorneys, but far fewer resumes than we are used to receiving. A few of those people that we have hired this year pointed out that they had done some research into King County and they had heard good things about working here, which is a good thing for all of us. I have worked very hard in the year that I have been the public defender to change the culture and the demeanor in our office, but I can't overcome the inequities in the pay scale. And that is really what I want to work towards now. When we have attorneys that are making far less than attorneys in other counties, it's easy to say, well, they're probably not going to pack up and move to Lake County. So I'm probably safe for a while in keeping those attorneys. But we have attorneys who have made roots in King County that want King County to be their home. And it's very hard to do that. And it's a hard pill to swallow when you know the inequities and the inequitable pay scale between people in the same county that are doing the same amount of work. This, what I have requested in my budget this year, will not get us to where we need to be, but it will help to bridge that gap. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Shepro.
Actually, it's not that far a drive from here to Lake County. It might not be desirable, but if it made you an extra, $25,000 a year, I would imagine people might very well do that. I guess my question is that besides the salaries presumably the bar admission year doesn't necessarily tell you what the capability is of doing the job they're supposed to do. And I wondered if you have seen a downward change in the experience level of the average attorney in the office because of turnover.
I think that is a very fair assessment, and the resumes that we are getting, certainly from an employer standpoint, I would like to hire people that have a little bit of experience. That's very hard to do when the starting salary is only 54,000, and they're getting better offers of at least 4,500 and more in other counties. So I would say that I am getting more brand new attorneys, which I wouldn't say is very uncommon because a lot of people come to a public defender's office or a state's attorney's office as their first job. But in the past, we have seen resumes with people who have a little bit more experience. Now we're getting a lot of brand new people, and that takes time and a lot more time and effort to train them. And you know, with the idea that potentially they're looking at Lake County and know 10 years from now in Lake County, they can be making $25,000 more than they're making in Kane in 10 years.
How long does it take you to train somebody brand new to be able to handle a felony case?
So that is several years. I mean, it's an ongoing process for several years. The hope is that we have that time to train them, to get them more than ready. You know, we've run into situations where we have lost attorneys at the felony level and we have needed to move people up from our misdemeanor level that maybe we wouldn't have done, but for the fact that we have no other options. We're not getting resumes from people who have the experience that they can go into a felony spot.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Tepe.
Tepe here. You said that you added an attorney in abuse and neglect last year. Are you adding anybody? Are you proposing to add anybody this year?
No, so my budget does not include any new positions. It just includes the salary and wages increases, and then the minor increases in a couple of other areas.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes, Mr. Martin.
To the relative to the Westlaw contract, do the justice partners try to negotiate with Westlaw as a group? In my recollection is that they're remarkably non-responsive. You either take Westlaw or you don't have research.
Yeah.
But is
And-
there anything that we do as a group?
So we do not. I think I got this question last year, and
I think it was me that asked it.
Well, and the interesting thing is, I was doing the presentation this year. I remembered that, and so it is on my list to talk to Ms. Mosser, and I know the judiciary uses it as well because our contract is actually up this year. The problem with doing it countywide is everyone probably has a different contract that ends at a different time. Ours does end this year, and we have to renegotiate that. So I definitely would like to reach out to the judiciary and to the state's attorney and talk to them
Well,
about
the
theirs.
state's attorney, the judiciary, and I don't know if the sheriff's office has a Westlaw contract. I mean, the
don't
whole
think
world is using Westlaw. It just seems like we ought to be able to do something to.
Well, it would be a lot of money for them
The
to
law
lose
library,
for
the
this
law
county.
library, the
Yes.
law library.
Mhm.
What?
They're called books. I know, I'm old, that's.
Oh, okay.
And
Well, anyway, I just,
I think that's an excellent idea. We do have a number of attorneys on board who can negotiate contracts. So we can have them go at it. I do have one question.
Oh, sure, yeah.
On the case category breakdown, you have it from August 11th. Can you share with us projections that you feel may go out through the next 4 months?
So in that breakdown, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to that slide. Sorry. Those, because 2020 was sort of an anomaly. Our numbers were down in 2020 because of COVID and the less arrests. I expect for felonies that we will probably be around 3,000, if not more.
In the next, we're going to increase it that much? Because right now felonies is,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm looking at the wrong slide. I believe.
I'm just curious, if you have any projections?
I would say that we are going to get pretty close to that 2674 of last year.
Okay, okay, okay. It's interesting, especially if we're going to be looking at perhaps some data for the ARP committee. So maybe we can reach out to you again and find out what your actual projections would be, because we're going to have to analyze some data, and this data is very important for
Absolutely,
that
yes.
committee.
I usually, that is included in our reports to judicial and public safety, but I would be happy to meet with anyone to discuss it further.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Appreciate
you.
that. Yes, one more question.
This is, I guess, a comment, is that I think we collectively have a bias toward looking at, head count. And while I think this comment would apply to maybe any department, I think in the case of attorneys, for either the state's attorney or the public defender, looking at head count, I think, can be very misleading. It's like saying the Chicago Cubs have a 25-man roster now, and the New York Yankees have a 25-man roster now, so there's no difference.
Easy now.
Well, I just think, again, I think it's important, to look at the experience level, the turnover. When someone who's a 7 or 8 year veteran leaves to go to Lake County and is replaced with a brand new hire, obviously it's not just a 1-for-1 trade-off. I don't know that there's a way to account for that, but I would be interested in seeing how we have been affected. I think that's a not as obvious way of finding out how the disparity in salaries affects the experience level of the staff.
And I will say, in our office within the last year, or within the last several years, we generally can keep our low level people. And our higher level ones. It's the mid-range that's what we're losing. And those are people that we've put time and effort into for, several years. And, every attorney in my office has chosen this job, not because they want to get rich, but because they're dedicated to public service. And, I know that for some of them that have moved on to private practice, it's a really hard decision for them, because I will say that working in King County judicial system is far outweighs other counties, and they know that, and they don't want to leave. It comes down to money.
Mhm. And as a point, I used to work in Lake County, living in Kane County, an 1.5 to 2 hour commute one way. So it is a bit of a distance.
I used to drive to Chicago.
1.5, 2 hours one way.
That's even longer then.
Mr. Surges would attest to that today. All right, thank
Stop
you
at
very
Oak
much.
Park for the
Thank you.
night.
This does not count against my time. So this is not working, Blair.
Ready for questions?
Yes, I'm all ready. Go, Vern.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Shortest presentation.
Blair, they're looking for the state's attorney's slides.
Hello, so my name is Jamie Mosser. I am your King County State's Attorney. I have one legal disclaimer to make about this because your elected state's attorney did not turn the presentation in on a timely manner. Finance is still reviewing this, so just please know this is a draft and it's going to have a final version soon. As you know from many of my other presentations for you, we have several different locations that we go to with all of our different crimes and ordinance violations and civil matters. We have myself, 66 assistant state's attorneys and 72 administrative staff. This is our chart, which even from here, I can tell no one could read this. So hopefully this will be emailed to you. There are a lot of changes that are being made to this as we change eventually to a vertical prosecution structure. This is our annual case filings that you'll see from 2018 till now. What you're going to see for felonies and misdemeanors is we're actually trending lower than we normally have. In COVID times, you'll see that the numbers were a little bit lower, and even now with 4 months left, we're not going to see an increase in what we had before. Our domestic violence cases, on the other hand, are skyrocketing, and that's both felonies and misdemeanors. And we only expect those numbers to continue. We always see an uptick of domestic violence cases during summer months, as well as holidays such as Thanksgiving and Christmas, because there's a lot of stress that goes. So we believe that we're going to exceed the 2020 numbers, which obviously had COVID going on during it. So you'll see that that crime just continued to go, pandemic or not. Our DUI cases as well, we're kind of seeing an uptick of those. And again, these are alcohol or drug related issues, which the more stress you add to your life, the more you may consume alcohol or drugs, which means then poor decision making like driving occurs. Our juvenile cases also are lower than what they were before. And I think this is attributed a lot to what our police departments are doing in diverting kids, along with our probation, our court services department, because they do a fantastic job of trying to divert kids out of the system as opposed to having to file a petition. Our traffic cases are trending a lot lower than they have before. 2020 started the idea that the police officers didn't ticket everybody in every situation, and that seems to be continuing to occur. This is our expense budget. As you can see, we kind of have an unwieldy budget in that we have several different funds for different categories. I'm going to kind of scroll through. These are our grants. As you know, we cannot be a revenue generating office. We do generate some revenues, and that's in our deferred prosecution program, but we also receive a significant amount of grants. Several people in our office have actually signed up to take grant writing classes so that in-house we might be able to apply for more grants to supplement income. Our budget requests are really centered around two things. As Ms. Conant said, increase pay for all of our state's attorney employees and to fund additional positions. Now, in the last 10 years, we've lost 189 employees, and this is for a variety of reasons, but mostly it's because of the high caseloads, the high stress, and the very low pay for all of that. What we did is we tried to look at how much money the county spends in training individuals who on average leave after 3 years of being an assistant state's attorney. If you look at the training that's dedicated to a person in those first 3 years, the attorney who is watching over them in classes, we give about $102,250 to each employee that we're training. I can imagine that's going to be similar for Ms. Conant. For our non-attorneys, again, it's the same reasons that they're leaving. The training that's dedicated to them is about $34,000 over a 3-year time period that we then potentially lose somebody to a higher paying job. Just like Ms. Conant said, there's so many reasons for leaving. It's mostly pay. When the pay is low, you also don't have the employee satisfaction when your job is as stressful as it is working in the court system that we work in. Our proposed budget increase includes an increase of $10,000 for administrative staff and $3,700 for lawyers. We're doing that to make us closer to Collier County pay and competitive with private sector pay. As Ms. Conant said, there is no reason why her attorneys are paid any differently from my employees in regards to the level of pay. So looking at this, you're going to see through a prior presentation that we actually showed that we are not competitive with the Collier counties, and we do lose people as a result of all of that. I'm going to quickly scroll through all of our funds because this has been provided to you. and talk to you about our next ask, which is new positions. So we have requested these new, 2 more minutes, Chairman, if that's okay. We've requested 2 new positions, or we've requested several new positions, but I have put those out in something that I think are wants versus needs. In terms of our wants, we would like another felony review ASA. The reasons are listed above. This is a person to help screen cases. This is somebody I think I may be able to find within the office if we're able to restructure in a way that better utilizes our attorneys. But that's going to come over time. VOP ASA is a violation of probation ASA. I don't have a person who can do this. So anyone who's not following their condition of the court, we have to file a violation of probation. It has to go up to a judge and it has to be litigated. We just do not have anybody that we can dedicate to do that work now. The needs are threefold. One is a child exploitation unit. I really want to point out that all of these cyber tips come in between January and May of this year. 48,658 files were discovered in Kane County alone. I have about 15 to 20 cases of child pornography that I charge at any time. We're not investigating these and charging these in the way that we should. And these are children who are being exploited. This is a need, and this is a need now because we are not being productive to what we should. A conviction integrity unit, I've mentioned this before, and again, this is to maintain the integrity of any of our investigations. If somebody makes an allegation that our prosecution was wrong, the investigation was wrong, we need an independent person to be able to review that. That is the best practice, and that's the way as Kane County, we show that what we are doing is ethical and right and just because it's being evaluated by a person who has defense attorney experience who would be working to review these cases. And lastly, a community prosecution unit director. Again, the Safety Act now requires us to provide more deflection programs. We need to get out of the courthouse and we need to get back into the community, and that's what this individual does. It's something Kane County had before with great success because we were actually going out and dealing with problems before they became criminal acts before us. A position like this decreases cases that are filed and allows people to be able to not come into the criminal justice system, which means we are not focusing on cases that have to deal with mental health, drug addiction, lack of resource to the extent that we are now. Again, criminal justice reform requires us to be able to change the way that we've been prosecuting cases, and we are working hard to do that. In terms of the countywide financial support, as Sheriff Haynes said, we are looking for alternative resources, and we're going to actually present that at the Finance Committee tomorrow. The cooperation amongst the judicial partners, I think, is at the highest it's ever been, including the sheriff obviously giving some of our budget. And as Ms. Conant said, we're going to talk about how we can share the resources we have as opposed to her office doing something, my office doing something, the clerk's office doing something. And then again, as we see that the COVID issues are affecting our system, utilizing that ARPA money now to make sure that we can get ahead of these issues and do the right thing is what we're going to do. And with that being said, questions?
Can you go back to the previous slide, please? Just a quick comment. I'm happy to learn about point number 2, and I look forward to that conversation tomorrow. I have referenced that with several of our board members, so that'll be the one that I hope you'll have great detail on because it's something we need to learn and hopefully agree to.
Agreed.
Well, there aren't really many opportunities for us to come up with more tax. So those are some of the ways.
Yes. Mr. Shepro.
2 questions, Jamie. I know you indicated in an earlier presentation that it's not an immediate need, but soon was the felony review. As I recall, your presentation indicated that you need to add an experienced or more experienced perhaps than average because of the one shot or you're out method of the bail review. But that's not an immediate need.
No, so that's separate. The felony review unit is just available 24 hours a day when a police officer calls to say, can I charge this person with a felony? The bond hearing that has to happen, the pretrial release hearing, doesn't come till 2023. inevitably, what I think we're going to have to do is combine the felony review unit with that pretrial services unit because it's all related to charges.
That's what I was gonna say, is I would think even a felony review, you've got to make a judgment as to whether when they make an arrest, it'll be available. And my second question was the integrity unit. What have you learned from its existing operations?
So we currently don't have a conviction integrity unit, but we've researched several throughout the United States, and we've actually had some great conversations with people such as in Philadelphia who have active ones. It's a twofold program. The first is if somebody makes an allegation that there's police misconduct or prosecutorial misconduct, then they review that. Or if there's an allegation of sentencing disparity. So this person got a higher sentence and this person got a lower, and it could be something that's race that's causing that. So that's one. The second portion of it is that individual can actually randomly review the cases that we have, ones where people aren't making complaints. But again, it's a report that we would be able to put out to say that we are testing ourselves independently. And again, the person that would be targeted for the conviction integrity unit is one that comes in with defense attorney experience. I don't need another prosecutor looking at all of these cases and saying we did a great job. We need to prove to everybody that we're doing this right, and I'm ready for that review. One of the things that I found out in all of this is that we may be able to share this expense with other counties because we may not have enough cases to even qualify for a full-time person. But if we ask DeKalb County, Kendall County, Lake County, all of the counties who are around us who may have that same need, it looks like it could be more of a shared expense between them.
That would also presumably give you data about intra-county disparity.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good. Yes, Mr. Surges.
Surges here. Jamie, when just so I'm clear, because I get fuzzy on this sometime, when we talk about this review committee and you say police, it's not police as in just our sheriff's department. It's the municipalities that are involved with this as well and their departments, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So is it fair to say that the funding that you need is not just a county issue of funding? It might be a municipal, do we charge them back if we have, how does that work?
Well, and that's a good question, because if we find that there was misconduct on the part of a police officer, what we can do at the state's attorney's office is petition the court to undo whatever was done. So undo the conviction, release a person from jail or prison, then that person has a civil action that they could take against the county or against the municipality. We wouldn't be able to charge back for any of that. The reason why I want a unit like this is to protect all of us. We know that there have been instances of prosecutorial and police officer misconduct. That's not a question. So instead of just putting our head in the sand, why not be proactive about saying we're actually looking for this to make sure it's not happening in our county? I want us to be the model for all of Illinois in terms of what we're doing in our conviction integrity unit and how we're actually doing an internal check and balance on what we do, as well as the police departments, to show that what we're doing is right. And if we're doing something wrong, we undo it as quickly as possible.
Totally get it and applaud you. I'm just trying to understand the scope.
I get it.
Thank you.
I appreciate the question.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Onsick,
Yes, I am here. Are you able to hear me?
can you speak a little
Barely.
bit louder, please?
Oh, yes, I am here. Hopefully you can hear me. I have miscellaneous budgets to review for you. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the first one. This is really the mailroom budget. It falls under the supervision of building management. It's unchanged for this year. Next slide. This is the operational support budget. So within this small budget, this is where we place expenses that are funded by
by the general fund as a whole. So we have like the cost of service study that will be done this year. It's showing up in the 2021 column. There will not be such a study planned for next year. So that's why that expense goes away. We have the transfer of the special reserve, or from the special reserve, that we transferred in 2021, but it disappears in 2022 because it's an every other year transfer. Then the highlighted transfers going to CANCOM are paying for CANCOM services provided to court services, emergency management, and the sheriff. And you can see there's a 5% increase in the cost of those services. The transfer of the pledged income tax revenue is the income tax revenue that is used to pay for the 2013 bond series. So the cost of that debt service is going up $106,000 in 2022. And then the last item is the $1 million transfer that we do each year out of the general fund to fund capital improvements. Next slide. This is the liability insurance detail. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had a message pop up on my screen. Okay, so these are just the details of what's in the insurance liability. So we have the third-party administrator cost, the liability insurance broker cost. We have the expense of Lehner Muchen, who assists with collective bargaining issues and employment issues. We have the cost of Hep B vaccinations. We have notary bonds, public official bonds. So all of those items are smaller items. The more significant one, of course, is the insurance premiums. At this point, and there's probably an update that I need to include here, what I've done in preparing this is take the actual premiums of this year and just added 5%. And once we know what the exact premiums will be for next year, we can update this. There's also an average liability insurance claims expense of about $500,000. And this is the what we pay out of pocket. And then all of this expense in the insurance liability fund is deducted or reduced by the amounts that we allocate out to the special revenue funds, and that's at $440,000. So basically, the change between the 2 years is almost zero. It's down to $5,500. Next slide. Workers' comp, it's a similar situation where I take the actual premiums for this year, add 5%. We're looking at a 3-year average of workers' comp claims expense, out-of-pocket expense. It's come down about $60,000, so it's $1.8 million. And then this expense is allocated out over special revenue funds, and so it reduces the expense by $525,000. And so overall, workers' comp expense is down $20,000. Next slide. Unemployment. This is, we have very little unemployment expense normally in the county. So it's based on a 3-year average. It did go up about $15,000, so I've increased it for 2022. And then again, we allocate this over special revenue funds. So the net change is about $1,100. Next slide. The county automation fund budget, this is a very tiny budget, $6,775. We use this to help fund software maintenance. And so this is set aside to pay for the timesheet software that's used countywide or eventually will be used countywide. Next slide. The IMRF budget, if we look at the bottom of this slide, that's the expense side. So we have like $44 million of general fund payroll for which there's IMRF benefits at 6.73%. And then we have about $19 million of public safety payroll that's eligible for SLEP pension benefits. And so the total cost of the two is $7,059,000. So how is this funded? If you look above there, we take $223,000, that red line item there, of the fund balance. That's about 10% of the excess fund balance, and we start by using that. We know that there is investment income, about $29,000, and then the rest has to do with the property tax. So we started with the property tax that was budgeted for this year. And then because the rates for IMRF actually went down from 2021 to 2022, we need less property tax revenue to fund this. So we're reducing it by $155,000 and shifting that $155,000 over to the general fund. Next slide, please. This is the FICA fund. Again, if you look at the bottom of the slide, you can see that we have a total of about $64 million of payroll expense in the general fund. And so that results in about almost $4.9 million worth of FICA expense. And then how is this paid for? We go to the top section on that red line. We're taking 10% of the excess fund balance, that's $68,000. We have investment revenue of about almost $13,000. And then here, the rest is funded by property tax. So we start with the property tax that we had this year, which is almost 4.3 million. Now we also need to increase it by almost $540,000. So in this case, we have to transfer some property tax revenue from the general fund to help shore up the FICA fund to make up that difference. Next slide, please. This is the special reserve fund. This is where we placed like savings from the COVID payroll reimbursement, for example. So there's about $8 million of savings sitting in this fund that is still to be allocated out for whatever the board decides to do. But that will be yielding investment income of about $33,600. And then there's $320,000 sitting in this fund that we put in there this year that will be drawn down next year to help pay for that second election that will take place in the county clerk's office. Next slide. This is the emergency reserve. Basically, it's a balance of $5.2 million. And so the only thing that we budget for is the investment revenue, which will be about $21,000, and that's added to the fund balance. Next slide. The Property Tax Freeze Protection Fund. We have about $2 million in it at this point. And again, the only thing we budget for is the investment revenue, which is $8,000. And of course, as part of the balancing the budget, the board may decide to use the $2 million to help balance it for next year or a portion of it. Next slide. The Public Building Commission Fund, it has a balance of about $1.1 million. And so all we're doing here is budgeting the investment income, and it's added to that fund balance. Next slide. This is the working cash fund budget. There's about almost $3.4 million of working cash. This is a fund that's required by statute for the county to have. It's just to make sure that we have enough cash on hand to pay our bills. So the only thing we actually do then for budget purposes is the investment income, and that's that $13,424, which is added to the fund balance. And I believe that concludes the presentation of miscellaneous budgets. Would anyone have any questions?
Mr. Shepro?
Yeah, Joe, for the liability insurance premiums, how has that changed, say, prior to what it was prior to the Maxim lawsuit and settlement?
It's gone up significantly. We saw the first hit this last year. I believe it went up over $1 million. So it did hit us hard. But going forward, the increases do not appear to be nearly so significant.
would it be reasonable that that could go down in future years if the claims history justifies it, or is it likely to be a permanent increase?
That is hard for me to answer. I'm really not an expert in that area. Perhaps Mr. Surgis might have some insights since he might deal with that, more so
If
than
I may, Joe?
Yes.
There, according to Rich Ryan, and I concur, they look at a 3 to 5 year loss run from comparative purposes. We have not seen that price drop, but if you'll recall, we're more concerned with the ability of carriers to accept us. And I believe that the more carriers that come on board, the diversified pricing will follow. That one of the challenges that we do have this year is that by no fault of ourselves, our reinsurance carrier has pulled from the market, and we are trying to shop and find a replacement for that. And quite honestly, we don't know if that will bear fruit or if that will, punch us in the nose.
And that's pulled not from us. They
pulled from
exited the
market,
whole
everybody.
reinsurance market.
Nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. So I want to be clear on that. We have reported that, and Rich and I have been working on that for about 45 days now. So
thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
To your point, decisions have consequences. Expensive consequences.
Very good.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Onzek? None? All right. I will try to be brief.
Start that
Present-
clock. Health insurance.
Start that
Insurance.
clock.
Gladly, gladly. Mr. Onzek is not going to be presenting the health insurance. He sent me an email that there was simply not enough time. He sends the health and dental insurance budget line items with new rates. He said this is not unusual. It has been difficult to complete by the state in the past since the rates are finalized so late in the budget process. So that'll be forthcoming. All right. Ta-da, there we are, King County Board. Look at that.
Start the clock.
Start that clock.
Start that clock.
We did in 3 minutes. This is your new 21 organizational chart, and this is what's existing at the current time. You can see it. Can I have the next one, please? It's smaller, but I'd like to call your attention to the item in the middle. In addition to a county administrator is a suggested new position I would like to present to the board for your consideration. Everything else remaining the same. You've already approved the public information officer. That position is still vacant. I have been very careful to make sure that whoever is hired for that position fits into the culture of the county. So we're coming close to finding that opportunity to be filled. And I will bring that candidate to you for your consensus, since it's going to be both myself and you approving these new positions. Next slide, please. This does do a detail of who's getting what benefits, including your compensation, which is all the same at $25,000. That is currently being reviewed, and those numbers will be brought forward to you. We do have plenty of time because that will not impact until the 23 budget. Because we're all set on our salaries right now, so there can be no changes. But do take a look at the differences between health insurance and IMRF contributions, and that is a variable cost depending upon the individual and their health insurance needs. And we have a few members who are still very much in IMRF. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our budget is very simple. The county board's staff and budget lines are very small in comparison to, let's say, to judicial or to the sheriff's department or building management or IT. We have a total amended budget of $1,330,434. And I have asked for, I believe it's a 23% increase due for next year due to the public information officer and the adjustment of having a county manager. And I would like to, because I know this is a large structural change that the county may be considering. I'd like to talk at depth about what a county administrator, I'm sorry, manager and administrator does at a separate meeting, because it's going to be a lengthy discussion where I would bring in subject experts from Northern Illinois University, a current employed county administrator, as well as a current county board chair from another county, giving them the opportunity to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I have a minute and a half left. Are there any questions? Yes.
Fraz speaking, just, takeaway, obviously, we're going to have to, another day, another discussion, but, this retention and recruitment thing, it just comes up time after time. And we're going to have to do something about it sometime. It's come up at, building management. We heard court services today, county clerk, public defender. So something we got to think about. And of course, then the other hit we take pretty routinely is the unfunded mandates.
Correct.
Which, I wish when the state legislators would pass something, they had a requirement that they had to find a funding source for it instead of just coming up with a great idea for someone else to pay for. And to keep you up at night too, we have to start thinking about space needs. All those agencies I just mentioned, except building management, are really strapped for space, and we're going to be adding new people. And I took a tour of the judicial center the other day, and cubicles and hallways, and it's just not a great thing. So lot to work on in the future.
We do, and lots of opportunities. I am interested in learning tomorrow about the Finance Committee's presentation regarding potential revenue increases. That'll be a fascinating conversation, and one I hope everyone here will be able to at least listen to, and if not, listen to the recording, because some of them are not based on property tax. So it'll be a little bit, perhaps a fair user tax. Yes, sir.
Chairman, I think it's time for my motion. to adjourn. People have to get home to their children. People have to get on the road. You have to go home, take care of that
little
aggressive dog of yours.
She was feisty today, for sure.
That a motion?
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Berman, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'll see you tomorrow morning.